Okay, like we talked about in class, there needs to be a way sometimes when you're developing and running code that you need to be able to control the flow of your logic or the flow of your execution. Sometimes they're, depending on certain variables, or depending on certain values or states of your program, you may want to execute certain lines of code and you may want to ignore others. And so within the language, there's a really easy construct, a really easy way to do this that's kind of it's all logic based, right? That's going to rely on Boolean variables or Boolean values of true or false to determine which way execution should actually go. The way to do it is with an if statement. Another sort of alternative to the if statement is something called a switch statement. This video will look at both of these. But before we do that, let's just go real quick refresher of logical operators. So these are operators that you can use on Boolean variables or Boolean values. You obviously have less than or equal to, less than, greater than or equal to, greater than. The double equals together is the logical equal. The exclamation point means not, so not equals would be exclamation point equal sign. And then the last two are logical and logical or. So what I'm going to do with this little video is we're just going to walk through an example where we're going to do something just using if statements and else statements, and then we'll basically recreate the same solution using a switch statement. So what I've done so far is I've already imported the IO library for Java so that I can get input from the user. For the simplicity of this video, we're just going to throw any IO exceptions that we run into. And I've already declared a buffered reader object. It's called in. If I want to use this, I can use this to get input from a user at the command line. So for this example, we're basically going to ask the user to choose from 4 colors. And then depending on what color the user types, we'll print out something to the screen that says this particular object is the color you selected. So first things first, let's tell the user what we want. And actually, instead of choose, why don't we say type, red, yellow, blue, or green. Okay. So that's going to tell our user what we're expecting them to do. The next thing we need to do is we need to save whatever value they type. So it's going to be a string, and it's going to be a color that they type, hopefully. Now when this executes, we will declare our buffered reader object. This will be transparent to the user. They won't see that. Next thing that happens is we will print instructions to the user telling them to type red, yellow, blue, or green. And then the third thing that will happen is when we hit this line right here, our program execution will halt. It'll wait for the user to type something in. Whatever that user types will then be stored in color. Now, if we want to actually do something depending on what they type, which is what's going on right here, right? If they type red, we want to say fire trucks are red, for instance. The way that you do that within the language using an if statement is you have the keyword if, parentheses, and then you have an open and a closed bracket. So if whatever you put in here must resolve to a true or false. So if whatever you put inside of this statement resolves to true, then it will print, or I'm sorry, it will do whatever code it will execute inside the code block beneath it. In this case, we want to basically see if the color that they typed is equal to red. If it is, we want to print fire trucks are red. Something like that, right? So what we're essentially saying is if they type red, we're going to do this assessment. It's going to say, does color, whatever the user typed, because we're storing it in a variable called color, does color equal red? If it does, then what we want to have happen is we want this statement to print out. Now, you'll notice when we run this, it's not going to work, right? We're going to get type red, yellow, blue, or green. I'm going to type red, and we're not going to get the statement fire trucks are red, even though we think we should, right? If you look at this. The reason this failed is, and actually the reason that this is yellow and underlined by NetBeans is saying that you're comparing strings using equals equals or not equals. Whenever you're comparing strings, what you need to do instead is you need to use the dot operator, or the string operator dot equals. And then you can specify the color or whatever, or I'm sorry, in this case you can specify whatever you want to compare it to. This is the equivalent of saying color equals equals red. With any other data type beyond strings, or primitive data type that is, you can use that equals equals sign. If you were comparing numbers, you could say, if 5 equals 5, we want to do something. That's a silly example, but I'm just trying to illustrate that when you're using any other data type beyond strings, that's considered to be primitive. So so integers, doubles, characters, that sort of thing. You can use this equals equals sign, the logical equals sign. If you're using strings, though, you need to use the dot equals operator. And this is essentially saying if color equals red, then we want to print this out. Now, if we run this time and we type red this time again, we'll see that we get our statement, fire trucks are red. So we can copy this on down for the other remaining colors, right? We can say, let's copy it 3 times over. When we want to do red, yellow, blue, green. We can fill these in. Grass is green. We can say the sky is blue. We could say bananas are yellow. Obviously, these comments don't make sense right here. Okay. What we also want to do, so essentially the way that we implemented this, if we run this right now, it's going to take our color value, it's going to compare it to see if it's red. If it's red, it's going to print fire trucks are red. If it's not red, if color is not red, it's going to say if color equals yellow. And then if that's not it, it's going to say if color equals blue, if color equals green. The way this is executed, no matter what, even if red is what I type, it's still going to do the comparison with these other 3 if statements. Now, if we know in this case that if we type red, we don't really need to look at the rest of this because we only have one case where we care about if it's red. So what we want to do is we want to say else if. If we put else's in front of these ifs, basically if we get red here, if the user types red, we're going to execute this line, fire trucks are red, and then we're basically going to skip down below the rest of these else's and go on about our way with program execution. The way we had it before, if we don't have the else's here, no matter what we get, true or false right here with this statement, we're going to evaluate every single one of them. For something as benign and silly as this example, it's probably not a big deal, but however, you should, if you have 4 cases and you want to do logic or execute logic based on each individual case, then you want to use an else if and something like this. Okay. And then what we can do at the very end, Java allows for something that could be thought of as a catch-all. And by that I mean if it's none of the 4 options above, then it would be caught by this. And so basically if that happened in this example, we want to say you did not type red, yellow, blue, or green. All right. So if we run this now and we type red, we should see fire trucks are red. If we type yellow, we get bananas are yellow. Suppose we type something other than what we asked for, or what the program asked for. Suppose we type purple. Then we're going to hit this else statement down here because it's not going to match green, blue, yellow, or red. And so what will happen is that we'll hit this catch-all, and we'll print you did not type red, yellow, blue, or green. Now there's one other kind of tricky thing here when you're doing string comparison. You have to recall that Java is case sensitive. So if I type capital R for red, it's still going to think that that red is not the same thing as this red, right? Because there's no capital R here. And so it will go through each one of these potential comparisons, and it will eventually end up in the else block saying you didn't type red, yellow, blue, or green, which in a very strict sense is true, right? We did not type it all lowercase. The easiest way to do that would be to normalize the input from the user. And by that I mean to either bounce it all to uppercase or all to lowercase, so that when we do the comparisons, we don't have to come up with a potential inequality, or if you will, that covers all possible combinations of how a user might type the word red. So what we can do here is we can say where n.readLine is being stored in color, what we can do is we can just bounce this all to lowercase. n.readLine is a string. It's going to give us a string, so we can use a string operator on it. So if we push dot after that parentheses, we can find to lowercase and execute it. So what will happen now is that no matter what the user types, if it's uppercase, lowercase, what have you, it won't matter because we're going to bounce it all the way to lowercase, and we're going to save whatever that value ends up being into our variable called color. And then if color equals lowercase red, lowercase yellow, lowercase blue, or lowercase green, then we will be successful. We'll get the output that we expect. So now we can run this again, and if I type capital red, or capital RED, you'll see that we get fire trucks are red. Again, because we're taking this capital R right here, and we're bouncing it to lowercase before we save it. Okay, so this is the if else statement. There's another construct that we can use to basically do the exact same thing. Excuse me. I'm going to just delete this for now, and we'll talk about switch statements. All right. So a switch statement is maybe a little bit easier to see, and it probably in a lot of ways can save you some typing. But fundamentally it works the exact same way. So we're going to switch on a variable. We're going to switch on color in this case. That's the thing that we want to compare, right? And inside of our switch block, we're going to establish cases. So we have a case where we get red, right? And we want to do something, whatever that is. And then we're going to have a keyword called break. And then we're going to have a case that's yellow, right? And we're going to put a colon there, break. We'll have a case blue. And then we're going to have a case green. And then there's one other case which is kind of the equivalent of the else statement, you know, the kind of the catch-all. In a switch statement, it's just called default. So basically, if nothing else is true, this is what we want to do. If we don't match any other criteria, then this is what we want to do. Okay. So if the case is red, what do we want to do? Just like in the previous example, we want to print some statement that says apples are red, or fire trucks are red, or whatever is red, right? We don't care. That's this example. You can have multiple lines in here. You can do as much logic or programming inside here. But essentially what's going to happen is if color, the variable that we're switching on, which is based on what the user types in right here, if it matches this case, then we're going to do whatever code is right here. After we do the code that's here, we're going to run into this break statement. That's going to pop us out of the switch statement, and we'll continue on down through execution. So you can see it's a very similar construct to what we just did with ifs and elses. But it's a little bit less typing, and it's a little bit easier to kind of see what's going on, I think. Bananas are yellow. All right, so this is essentially doing the exact same thing as what we just had a second ago. This doesn't have to be a string. It can be an integer data type. It can be a double data type. It can be a lot of different things. But inside of our switch block, we're going to have the keyword case. We're going to have sort of the idea of what we want to compare to, or the value we want to compare to. This inside the in between the case statement and the break statement is the same as what would be included below the or in the if block, in the block of code following a comparison statement. And then the break is just going to bounce us out, so it kind of represents the last curly brace of an if block. And if we run this now, if we type red, we get apples are red. If we run it again and we type silver, right. You did not type red, yellow, blue, or green. So again, you can see what's going on here. Really simple examples of how this works. Again, you can do this on different data types all day long. Switch statements are useful when you know all the values that you're going to be comparing, or you're looking for specific values, like we are in this case. If-else statements are better when you're doing inequalities, or you're trying to see if something's bigger than something else, or if you don't have a set number of instances and you're just really kind of honing in on one particular value of a variable or the state of your program or what have you. So hopefully this is helpful. If you need to see the structure of the if statements, just rewind the video and you can go back and freeze it or pause it and see what's going on there. But hopefully this will help you get a little bit more familiar with syntax and get you a little sharper on managing conditional logic within your programming.